Hey everybody, Wayne here. In today's overview and review, we are going to take a look at Autumn for Barbarossa Deluxe Edition, published by MMP, game designed by Hans Kishel, and series designed by Dean Essig. First off, I either have allergies or a little bit of a cold, so apologies for that. Hopefully we can get through this video without it sounding too bad. So just a warning for you guys. Okay, so Autumn for Barbarossa. It's a hex encounter wargame using the standard combat series of rules. The original Autumn for Barbarossa, it was released in Special Ops Magazine number 7. This deluxe version is actually a new as in the filming of this, standalone release. So I mentioned the designer who designed this particular game, then the series, SCS, right, the standard combat series. Ton of those games are out there. I mean, I almost want to say dozens. I probably own over a dozen myself, so personally really enjoy the series. It's a simple series of rules. That's why it's called standard combat series, right? It's standardized sort of hex encounter, very basic, but at the same time, depending on the game, and not all winners, but depending on the game, it often is a lot of fun. So obviously, Autumn for Barbarossa focuses on the struggle to seize Smolensk in the late summer of 1941. You can see Smolensk right here in the middle of the map. This marks the end of the opening phase of Operation Barbarossa and the stabilization of the front until the effort to take Moscow in Operation Typhoon in the fall. Now, I have a recon video, an unbagging if you will, and then there should be a tutorial partial playthrough. It's not playthrough the whole game at all, but a tutorial playthrough of a turn or so uploaded already. You guys can check those out before you dive into this overview and review, unless you just want to jump in which case, here we go. So, in this game, play begins with the Germans on the offensive, and they have a huge advantage in the army strength. The German player attempts to rapidly seize as much of the map as they can, and obviously you can see the Germans here in the classic gray. You have the Russians with more of the brown. They're starting over here in the west, and they are working their way east. There are 30 victory point locations. I have them marked with red cubes. The game does not come with red cubes. I put those out myself. I like to have them to show me where the VP locations are. The game does come with hex control markers though. So, depending on whether you want to use them right away to kind of show those are victory point spots, put them on top of, the units and areas, because some of them have, it's just a location. Some already have a combat unit there, etc. You could go ahead and put, the marker there, put it on top if you want, or just use them when they change sides. Because at the beginning of the game, everyone is Soviet controlled. And that's what I do. I just use them when the Germans take an area. So, obviously, as you can tell, speed is essential. An interesting part of this game is that at some point, there is a role where, Hitler decides, okay, we got to get those forces out of there. We're going to move them somewhere else where we're having a little more success. So the actual the mechanized forces are taken off the map, and then air support is cut in half. That's when the Soviets can now attempt to turn things around and push back and retake territory and VP locations that the Germans have taken. So that's it for the introduction. This is the normal format for my overviews and reviews. So we're going to do the overview. We're going to go ahead and zoom in out on the map. We're going to look at the map itself, some counters, kind of a quick little overview on how the SCS series works, and then also how this game is. Combat with the airstrikes, combat, etc. And then we're going to go ahead and come back up. I'll go through my pros and cons first, and then give you my final thoughts. All right, so here's the overview. Now we're just do a quick overview of the map, the unit counters, the combat units that are on there, what the numbers mean, what the yellow stripe means, how airstrikes work, and then overall how combat works, including overrun. This isn't going to be super in-depth because I have a tutorial playthrough or partial playthrough. You guys can check that video out for really in-depth because you're literally going to see me playing through multiple combats and such. But in this case, at least give you guys a good overview if you haven't watched that video. So, starting off, you guys saw the map already, right? I zoomed in now for this part, and we'll zoom back out again when we get to the pros and cons. You have, the German forces out here in the west, moving their way east. You have Smolensk here in the middle. I went ahead and just set a German unit. Normally, he wouldn't be here like this. I just went ahead and plopped him over here. And I put an airstrike counter down as well. Now, there are victory point locations. Like I mentioned before, there's 30 of them. So what you have is, I went and put red blocks just as a good visual reminder as I'm playing, because sometimes they're, the actual VP location is obscured by a combat unit. well, if you have some cubes or something, good way to do it. Or like I mentioned before, you have those little VP hex markers you can use. So let's go ahead and get those out of the way. Now we have some combat units here. Now you guys should be able to see it pretty easily. We're looking at things like standard NATO symbol. These are division size here. This Panzer is, I can't remember what that is. Is that a battalion? No, I can't remember what size that is. My apologies. I'm not an expert on the NATO symbology outside of some of them. For instance, like I said, I know that the 2X's, I know that's a division anyway. I got that down. But anyway, we have some Soviet infantry here, a German Panzer, so tank unit, and then a Soviet tank division over here. We also have an airstrike marker set here. So pretty standard, what you see in a lot of war games would be the attack, the defense, and then the movement. Looking on the map here, you can see everything from rivers, you can see railroad tracks, roads, tracks, cities, there's villages, somewhere around here there's a village. So you have different types of terrain. And then also, obviously, you have, open terrain, you have light woods, you have heavy woods, there's some swamp around here you can see. All those have different values for, not only your movement, but also for how it affects combat. Generally, it's going to be things like if you're attacking across a river, the attacker's, combat factors is halved. Or if the defender is, in a village or a city or the woods, there's going to be a shift on the CRT. Pretty standard. You're counting up your factors and attacking. It could be as simple as, hey, this German Panzer unit is attacking the infantry here. He has a 9 attack versus 5 defense. I was looking at his attack as well. So 9 attack versus 5 defense. It's the rounding rule, they call it. So if it's at least half, it actually goes up. It's like standard mathematics, right? However, that's not most war games. Most war games, you drop remainders. Like if it's not a full one, it don't count. Well, in SCS, it does. In this game, it does. So in the right circumstances, you may think that it's going to drop a remainder and you're going to lose. You're actually going to gain on that. It's actually going to go ahead and round up for you. So you go ahead, you can see 9 to 5 is, normally you'd say, okay, what's the odds ratio in that? Well, it's not 2 to 1, it's less than that, so it must only be 1 to 1, right? Not in SCS, because that 9 divided by 2 becomes 4.5. Because it's that 0.5 or higher, it rounds back up, becomes 5. Boom. You're looking at 2 to 1. So this would be 2 to 1 odds, rolling a CRT, and you get your result. Now he's in open terrain, so no big deal there. But an additional thing, so besides the, just pretty classic, other than the rounding thing, like I said, which I feel is fairly unique to SCS here, is the fact that the yellow stripes here. So these are overrun capable, exploit capable units. What that means is they are generally able to, and in this game specifically, so say the German turn, there is a reinforcements phase at first, then there's movement and airstrikes. So every unit can move up to its movement value. You can do airstrikes, etc. Okay. Then you do combat phase. Then there's another phase that features exploitation and airstrikes. Now, that means these units, and they can actually do this during their movement phase as well, they can do what's called overrun. So they can do, every unit can do regular movement, then the combat. But what these guys can do if they have that yellow stripe is there an extra phase where they can do exploitation phase, which means they can move and they can do overrun. So because they have the yellow stripe, generally that means they're mechanized, right? They're getting extra movement ability. Well, overrun allows you to combine movement and combat into one. So it's not a separate combat phase. What it is he would be able to go ahead and basically, if he had enough movement points, move into the Soviet hex here and engage in combat as part of the movement. Well, technically, he's not moving into it. Technically, according to the rules, he's still in his hex. They're in their hex, but you get the idea, right? As part of his movement, he gets to engage in another combat. So in the SCS series and in this game specifically, that puts a tremendous amount of value on mechanized units, the yellow striped units, because they get to do an extra movement and they get to combine movement and combat. I mean, they can have multiple combats in one turn. A regular infantry division like this, move once, one combat, or at least offensive combat. They may be attacked more than once, in a different phase anyway. But exploit capable units with the yellow stripe, tremendous value to them. So those are two unique things I wanted to cover specifically, was the rounding rule, right? The 0.5 rounds up. You don't drop remainders here. If it's at 0.5 or higher, you round up. That's pretty unique as far as I'm kind of aware. And then also the overrun capable. That's not that mechanized units having additional abilities is unique, but just the fact that that is what they do, and that's how you can tell in this series and in this game in particular. Finally, airstrikes. So each turn, rolling for airstrikes, see how many you get. Airstrikes, you go ahead and assign them. You can break them up if you want to have more but weaker airstrikes, or you can use a regular airstrike. Pretty simple. You'd put down some markers where you want to use them, and you can use some in the movement and airstrikes phase, and then again later in the exploitation and airstrikes phase. You go ahead and set them on a certain hex. You roll against the rating, which is either, depending on if it's going to be 4, or if you broke it down into smaller, it'll only be 2. But the regular one would be 4, as you can see the number 4 on there. If you roll a 4 or less, the target stack becomes disorganized. So if we're doing airstrike here and we rolled 4 or less, you go ahead and you throw the disorganization marker on there. In addition, for every disorganized result, so you could do multiple airstrikes. You could do, say, 2 or 3 airstrikes against a hex. For every time you get a disorganized one of these, yes, you only put 1 on there, but for every result, you actually make a kill roll. So for every unit in that hex, you're going to make a roll on a 1d6. On a 5 or 6, the unit takes a step loss. If you roll 1 to 4, nothing. So airstrikes, they're not overpowering. You get a lot of just disorganized results, although disorganization will, basically units can't exploit. They are at half attack, half defense, half movement. So it is a really nice result when you're on the offensive anyway. When you're launching the airstrikes, it's a nice result. So, but there's a potential to cause step losses. It's just not, because you have to roll successfully basically twice to do it. It doesn't happen a ton. So I think that covers the basic combat. And again, I mentioned overrun. I didn't go deep into all of it, but that's okay. Just quick example, quick explanation. You got it in the tutorial playthrough if you want to see it. Other than that, I think that's it for the overview here. Oh, actually, one thing. Before we go on to the next, before we cut to the next phase, I just want to mention, because I don't think I mentioned it in the introduction, I want to make sure to cover it. So at the end of the game, when you're checking victory points for victory, it's basically you see how many victory points the Soviets still have left. If they are at a certain number, and it's on the chart in here, I don't have it memorized, of course, because it's just kind of part of the game. But basically, if I'm trying to look at it right now just to see if it's on anything, I can show you quick. Where'd it go? Oh, here it is. The victory chart. So just to show you guys quick. So total number of victory points the Soviet player controls at the end of play. Control being defined as the last to enter or move through a hex. And you can see really if the the Soviets, as long as they have 22 or more VPs, they have the historic outcome or Soviet victory. Anything less, it begins going down to German victory. So you do have to play through a complete game before it ends. It doesn't end early under any circumstances. Basically, you have to play through a complete game of the 10 turns. So, all right, I think that is it for now. That's it for the overview. All right, time for the pros and cons. As usual, start with my cons first, things I didn't like, and we'll end with the things I did. So first off, things I didn't like. First one, the physical components in this deluxe version, kind of a mixed bag. There's some good, there's some bad. I'll cover what I like in my pros. But for the cons, the main thing I don't like is the split map. So as you can see, it's basically a full-size map, and it's technically, I think I measured it's technically, I believe I measured it's 21.5 by 36 inches. It's supposed to be, I think, 22 by 36. Maybe it's cut a little different, whatever. So 22 by 36 inch. So approximately a full-size map, right? 22 to 34, 22 to 32, etc. So around one mapper, we'd call a one mapper. However, it actually comes in 2 segments, 22 inch by 18 inch segments. You have to line them up here in the middle, and then, merge them together. So I always use plexiglass with paper maps. So for me, it isn't a huge issue, although lining them up can be a pain, right? Because you're lining up the hexes. So the line for it is right here. You probably can't see it up there. There's a couple breaks in the hexes and stuff. When you're up close, you can see it. Far away, you can't really. So I'm sure as far as I have the camera back so you guys can see the entire map, you probably can't even see it. Not the end of the world. However, I would say if you're the type that, and I've seen gamers that do this, you're just, you just backfold paper maps and you just play on them just on the table, good luck with this one. I think it's going to be kind of hard to get them lined up, stay lined up without having a plexi. So this may be the type of game that, not just because it's a paper map, but also because it comes in two separate pieces, you may have to use plexiglass or, poster frame or whatever it is that you do to keep your games like that held down. So second thing, so the counter and map artwork, it's functional, not much else. So I mentioned this in my unboxing or unbagging. And it's not entirely a bad thing. Nothing is distracting from game information, but I think it's pretty clear that, when we looked at the overview, you saw the units up close. You can see some here, you can see the map, and we saw the map a little bit closer. I mean, the best part about this is the airstrike marker, with actual real artwork and some little bit of color and stuff. That's just, those are only on there when you're doing airstrikes. The rest of the time, you're looking at, brown and gray, and they look like that. Some numbers, some in black, some in white, and NATO symbology in black. That's about it. Map, simple, clean, easy to read, but at no point are you going to be like, man, I got to put this up on my wall. So just, it could be considered a con. For me, it is. I do like my games to look maybe a little flashier, a little better. I mean, keep in mind, it's not just about the experience of, moving these counters around and, adding up combat factors and rolling on a table. It's about be immersive, right? Getting into the experience. And if the components are boring and plain, that can detract from it. So that's pretty common with standard combat series of games. However, that doesn't mean it has to be that way. And I think that's why I don't mind saying it. I don't mind bringing it up. So, all right. So now on to a couple gameplay issues I have. So one of them is how the airstrikes are handled. So each turn, generally one side or the other will get a number of airstrikes, but it's completely random. It's usually like 2d6 or 1d6. In fact, I think that's what it is for each of the turns. There's airstrikes. 2d6, 2d6, 1d6, stuff I'm looking at right now. So it's over, and I have it over here on the turn record chart. That's a huge swing in that number of airstrikes. I think it's too random. So just rolling, you could have anywhere from 2 to 12 airstrikes in a turn. How is that, randomness and chaos in battle? Definitely a thing, right? But don't you think that that's kind of a lot for what could be, say, the start of it, right? Where the Germans are on the offensive and they have the air power and they have ground forces, and you could just roll a 2 and now they suddenly only have 2 airstrikes to dole out. Or you could roll an 11 and boom, now you got airstrikes all over the board. Just probably a little too random to me. I'd rather see something like, okay, each turn has a set number. Say turn number 1, for the Germans, it's 6 plus a 1d6. Because at least then you're looking at 7 to 12. Little less chaos there. So, finally, the CRT. It's a little swingy. I can't remember every CRT for every, SCS game I've ever played, but it's definitely swingy. I think that's pretty common with SCS games. Again, kind of a little focus on chaos. Chaos kind of rules in this game. For being an I Go, You Go style of game, it definitely has a lot of chaos involved. Another thing with the CRT, it's kind of interesting. There's no unit elimination, right? There's no EX, eliminate all units, anything like that in a hex. The most you can do, I think, is 5 step losses. So if you outnumber something like 6 to 1, you can still, as a max, only do 5 step losses. Well, you may not be able to eliminate the enemy with that. So just keep that in mind. All right, on to my pros. I mentioned the physical components and the cons, specifically how the map is 2 separate pieces. However, on the positive side, this is the first SCS game that I'm aware of, and please correct me in the comments below if I'm wrong. Go ahead, feel free. This is just what I've not played every SCS game, although I'm a big fan of this series. I can't say I have all of them. But I believe this is the first one that uses 5/8 inch counters. Normally, they're little half-inch counters. Including the original release of this was half-inch counters on a smaller map. Now we have a full-size map with 5/8 inch counters. So I will say it is a pleasure to be able to handle these counters using my fingers instead of tweezers. I got fat fingers, so when it comes to half-inch games, and I play them, simple Great Battles of History, and I use a simple system you guys have seen on the channel. The other SCS games, I think I did Bastogne. I'm not sure what I did with Bastogne, but anyway, tweezers, sure. I got tweezers. I use them, no problem, right? You do what you got to do. But it is nice to be able to actually manipulate the counters with my fingers and not have to worry. Also, and I think this is worth mentioning, although I don't have any issues with my vision at all, I know some older gamers do. So if you struggle with being able to read, half-inch counters from a distance, which I've heard of from people, absolutely, this deluxe version with the larger counters may be a significant quality of life improvement for you. And speaking of the counters, another pro worth mentioning is how easy they are to read. So I kind of talked about them a little bit with just the fact that you have that information on there and how they're kind of simple. Well, even with the other half-inch SCS counters, those games, these are really easy to read from a distance. So the combat information, what really matters to the game is pretty large on the counters. It's in a clear font, no graphics to distract them, right? Was that a con? Did I list it as a con somewhat, right, with the lack of graphics? I did. So hopefully I'm not too hypocritical here. But my point is that I think you can kind of look on the map, and maybe from here, because I got the camera way up just so I can have everything covered in the video. You may not be able to see it too well, but trust me, when you're sitting there, when I'm sitting down here, I can see no problem whatsoever. I don't have to lean over at all. You only may have to lean over to manipulate a little bit. But as for reading them, super clear, super easy to read. The numbers are large. Really appreciate the fact that they're in the larger counters. And other than when maps and games get too big, I think that's a good thing. So, speaking of big maps, like I said before, it's effectively a single mapper. So, yes, it comes in 2 separate pieces, but the total size is right around a traditional one-map war game. So, there's also a limited amount of units in the game compared to some of the larger ones. I think it came to a counter sheet and a half, but remember, counter sheet and a half of larger counters, right? Not half-inch counters, so that's already less counters. And you can see them. This is set up. This isn't every counter in the game because I have the German reinforcements over here, a couple big stacks. I have a bunch of Russian units off the board. So there's a number of counters, but this is the initial setup minus the German stacks reinforcements over here, which will be a few units in each of these reinforcement hexes. So you can see, it's not that crazy, right? Is it a full-size war game? Full size as in a full mapper? Absolutely. But it's not too crazy. It's a limited amount of units, again, compared to a lot of those SCS games. And I own some of the SCS games that honestly I'll probably never play. Day of Days, God bless, but I ain't putting out, I don't even have room for it, much less, the hundreds, if not thousands of counters. So anyway, it's a big plus to me because in my mind, this game is playable. The physical version is playable, not just a vassal version. You can actually set it up. You can play it. You can reset it, and play it again. There's no multi-hour setup time here. So unlike, and I've had some of the bigger games, some of the SCS games that have just a ton of counters. I've basically seen people online saying, well, like they buy it, but they just buy it and then they can play the vassal version on the computer. Well, that's not, I play computer games that are different computer games, right? When I'm playing war games, I like physical war games. I like to touch the counters, see the map on my table, use my imagination with it. If I want to play a computer game, I go on Steam. I got hundreds of games with awesome 3D graphics. I'm definitely not playing one of these on Vassal either. So if you like the physical version, this is it right here. And it's a type of SCS game you can physically play, not just on Vassal. So that wraps up my pros and cons. All right, everyone. Time for my final thoughts. So, Autumn for Barbarossa, the Deluxe Edition, is a welcome release from MMP. The original Autumn for Barbarossa that came in Special Ops magazine, it's long sold out. In fact, I did some research and I saw that a copy sold last year for almost $100 on Board Game Geek Marketplace. $100 for, a magazine war game. Crazy, right? Considering I was able to purchase this brand new copy for less than half that, if you're eyeballing the game at all, you're already kind of leaning towards it, now's the time to pick up a copy. And again, I've mentioned this before in other overviews and reviews. I don't always like to talk about price and cost because that varies so much. Are you in the United States? Are you overseas? Are you buying it from new? Are you buying it from a third party? Are you, are you trading for it? There's a lot of different, is it used? Is it new? But my point is that clearly what was once out of print, out of stock, really hard to get game is now available brand new from the publisher. If you can get a copy, now is the time, right? If you're interested. Now, let's be clear. This is a 2-player game. It's not a solitaire one. I cover solitaire games on my channel. I focus on solitaire games. However, I cover 2-player games, you can play solitaire. Autumn for Barbarossa, it's a 2-player game. There's no solitaire system or bot. You are simply playing both sides to the best of your ability. And it's basic I go, you go. So to be fair, there are some SES games that actually have a chit pull mechanism, which I do generally find superior for solo gaming. Look at my, massive interest and love of the blind sword systems from the evil genius Herman Lotman, right? Chit pull, there's 2-player games, but chit pull, love it. I feel that solo's as easy as anything. However, Autumn for Barbarossa does have a few things going for it that make it work solitaire. So the nature of this battle has 2 distinct phases. The first is the Germans are on the offensive, right? You start off, and the Soviets are just trying to hold on. In the second half of the game, the German mechanized units actually get pulled from the map, the airstrikes get cut in half, and suddenly the Soviets have the opportunity to go on the offensive. Honestly, it's kind of a microcosm of the entire Eastern Front, right? If you start from, 41 to 45, very German strong, weak, start getting weaker, running out of time, and then the red tide pushes them back. But with this game, it means that each side has different capabilities at different times, meaning you aren't really trying to do the same thing with both sides every turn, right? It's not a slugging match back and forth of the same way. It's a big ebb and flow. Another nice feature is there's no hidden information. So the only time things are hidden is due to the fog of war rule. If I didn't mention that during the overview, what that means is the attacker can only look at the top combat unit in a hex before launching an attack, and the rest of the units are only checked after combat is declared. So, and if you're anything like me, there's no way you'll remember the exact combat strength of every stack. Yes, sometimes you'll have single stacks. In fact, the game setup kind of has the Germans more stacked with the Soviets, primarily single units spread out. But by halfway through, you're going to start having more stacks. The Soviets are kind of consolidating their forces. They're getting reinforcements on the map. The Germans are running maybe a little thin. What happens then is, and again, like me, if you're like me at all, you're not going to have everything memorized, right? So even though you think, as the attacker, you're looking like, well, I was playing them, and I don't think they're super strong here. I'm going to launch my attack. They may not be. You don't even know for sure. I mean, again, unless you have tremendous memory, in which case, good for you, but that might not be the game for you. For me, that works. So finally, I can recommend this game to a few different types of people. First, if you're new to Hex Encounter Wargaming, I think this would be a solid entry point. So the rules for the standard combat series are simple, and the game-specific rules don't add much chrome. The rules for SCS, as they come with it, which is 1.8, I believe, are 7 pages, and then of actual rules. And then the game-specific rules are 3 pages. So this doesn't include setup pages, designer notes, anything like that, or player aids that are in the rulebook, anything like that. And there's pictures of examples, etc. So 10 pages of rules for the actual series rules, and then this game with pictures and examples. That's about as basic as you're gonna get with Hex Encounter games. And the rules themselves, the game-specific ones, they don't add much chrome. And in addition, and I mentioned this before, I think, setup. It's not too tedious. And that is kind of a big problem for some of the larger multi-map SCS games. And in fact, some of the one-mappers, I'm looking at you, what's that last recent release? The Cold War one? Not Cold War, but World War III one? What was it called? Yeah, I can't remember. I actually unloaded my copy because I was like, I can't do this. I don't have that patience to, set up 600 units on one map. Even if it's only a one-mapper, can't do it. This one, you can see what you got set up. Not too tedious, not too crazy. Yes, it takes longer than, some block games or some of the single-player only games you see, smaller games, States of Siege style games, right? Those are much quicker, but those are quicker to set up, quicker to play. This is more of a longer game with more depth to it. So, at least in that aspect of it, the number of units depth, not always necessarily gameplay. So, now, lack of hidden information, and other than the fog of war rule, which I think is super solo friendly, you don't have to modify the rules just to be able to play solitaire. I've seen people with other games, 2-player games that are like, well, if you modify this rule and change this completely and do this right, they have a full page of custom rules of theirs that they created to play at solitaire. Well, that's not what I'm about, right? I want to play the game as written, rules as written. Is it good solitaire? Yes. Are there better solitaire war games out there? Sure, of course. There are ones that are designed for solitaire, and there are Hex Encounter games that I would put ahead of this overall. But for a 2-player Hex Encounter war game that is solo friendly, Autumn for Barbarossa Deluxe Edition is worth a look. Hope you guys enjoyed this overview and review. Please let me know below, have you played the OG version? Have you checked out this one also? Are you sticking with the OG one? Because you're like, I don't need bigger counters or bigger map. That's, that's for you guys, you chumps. I'm just fine with the smaller one. That's cool too. Or maybe you're interested in this. Maybe you want to take a look, say, and maybe you're brand new to wargaming. And you're like, you know what? This could be a good hex encounter wargame to pick up. I would definitely recommend it. So regardless, let me know your guys' thoughts below. Let me know if you like this. Let me know if you want to cover more hex encounter games. Can't guarantee I will do it. It's a little bit different than some of the other games, but I do enjoy hex encounter war games, and this is just another example of it. So until next time, guys, later.